Yes, where we are. Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Dave. How are you all? And welcome to Talking Niagara this morning. We are live for you.
Yes, last time I checked my pulse, I'm still here.
Damn! I was counting upon that knocking you out sometime soon. No, I would
Well,
never.
One day.
I would never say that. So, how are you?
Not bad, not bad. What was the lovely day yesterday?
Not when you've got an office that's got no air conditioning in it.
Oh, can't you get one of those portables?
Yeah, one of those portables that moves cold air, that gives me cold air and moves hot air down the hallway.
No, it's got to be hooked up to a window.
Yeah, we haven't got open windows.
No one has they got any ducts? Do you have return ducts?
Nope.
Well, then you're I guess you just bring a cooler full of ice with a little fan, and it'll probably last you until noon.
Yeah, exactly. So I could go out to a place that has ice, and they'll Anyway, we've been told the AC will be fixed today.
All right. Well, don't forget the power of a fan. And remember, all these offices
I've got
no
two fans going in my office, and I've got hearings today, so they better have it on by the time I'm going to my hearing.
Well, or else you'll be standing in front of your fans at the hearing with your hair up like this.
Yeah, exactly, and it doesn't look very impressive when you got sweat beads coming down your forehead.
Well, that's a good thing our justices don't wear wigs anymore. They would be so hot, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that in the International Court, Criminal Court, and the International Court of Justice, there are periodically people with wigs. The colonies, the former colonies of Britain, many of their, whether they be black, white, or Asian or whatever, they still wear the wig.
They still wear the traditional barrister's gown.
Yeah, well, the gown and the wig. Yeah. The wig is the gown. Everybody still seems to wear that even here, but the wig is the thing that throws me. And
I've got a picture of me.
Wait a minute. The one that really tossed me was one that was black. So there was a black guy with gray hair, and he had a wig on made of black hair. In other words,
I've never seen a black wig.
No, I thought it was very unusual. I don't know if
I didn't know there was such a thing. Yeah. Okay. No. And a lot of these traditions. What was with the wig, and why was it ever popular? Yeah.
Well, that'll take some time. Because there was in the 17th century, the 1600s, it became fashionable for men to grow out their hair, and the more curly and longer the hair was, the better. So what was happening is people then were wearing wigs instead. If you see pictures of Louis the Sun King or the Duke of Marlborough, they would have these long, elaborate locks, and they were mostly all wigs. If you could do it naturally, you would, but most people couldn't. So they wore a wig. And then these wigs just kind of morphed into something smaller and smaller, that they become a status symbol, basically. And that's why George Washington, Jefferson, Adams, all those early fathers, Benjamin Franklin, all wore wigs.
You look at the British
Parliament, the more the cut down wig, the smaller wigs that were typical of the late 18th century.
And you look at the British parliamentarians of the day, and they all had wigs.
Yes, because now it became a status symbol, and the big long wigs that the kings and stuff, it became much shorter and easier to carry around. And that's why like George Washington, every one of the founding fathers wore a wig because it was the style of the time and it meant something if you could afford a wig. As far as the justices are concerned, it was because the big wigs at one time were the people who ran a court. And so you just typically got yourself a wig to display your status.
Yep. Oh, yeah. All right.
That answers your question, Mike.
Statistics. Thank you, because I thought I was going to have to give that answer, given my background in law. But I do thank you. You know, it's actually, you know, it's interesting that back in those days that they chose the wig, particularly for the justices.
Right. Yeah, it ended up being that in the British system, the justices wore wigs because it was a status of their trade, right? Law. And a little later, and remember too, though, but there was this push during the 17th century to make men more sophisticated and less brutish. So the Sun King, which I just mentioned, invented ballet for men in the 17th century. It was for men because he thought men were too clumsy and rough and coarse. He wanted to make them more, just have a little more sophistication.
Okay. Well, Statistics Canada has basically announced that Canada's inflation rates fell to 2.7% in April. And whether the drop is enough for the Bank of Canada to start cutting interest rate is still another question. But one of the biggest contributors was the drop in grocery inflation. I always find it odd when people talk about drops in inflation. The name inflation means prices are going up. So you're dropping inflation. Yeah. Anyway. So groceries are 1.4% higher than they were a year ago now, which is basically what's contributing to our inflation rate of 2.7% at the end of April. And the high point was 8.1% in June of 2022.
This is so everybody think, well, some people may be shocked, but not too many others. And this is the layering effect that the conservatives like you to learn about. When you look at the gas prices and you look at the rebate that the person's getting back, it appears that person is doing better than they are. They're getting more money back. The problem with that is they don't consider the layering that the government's own report said. Yeah. So for that particular, for buying gas, you'll get a rebate and you'll get more back than you won't. But what they have in the report, but the part that the liberals ignore and the conservatives point out, is the layering effect of more gas, more fuel cost to the farmer, which makes the groceries more. The fuel cost to the distributors, the fuel cost to the truck drivers, etc. All that layers on top. So the food, and we think of something like Loblaws making standout profits. They sound pretty good, but when you look at them, when you really dig deep, those profits wouldn't make a whole lot of difference in the price of the groceries. What is those things come from transportation and how they're grown. We will be having a lot of local stuff lately, but don't expect in the farmers market, don't expect that to be any real cheaper either, because the farmer that brings it here still has to bring it here, still has to put diesel in his.
Okay, right now, the inflation factors for all those three. Groceries are sitting at 1.4%, transportation at 3.1%, and shelter at 6.4%. So the rents are still going up by 6.4% on average.
Yeah, this is kind of well, this is nothing new either, because I'm very certain that you and I spoke of the inflation rate expected to be 2.7 this spring, and the Bank of Canada has already come up with a comments earlier, about a month or so ago, that they don't, or even 6 weeks ago, they don't plan to drop the interest rate anytime soon. They're looking for a growth rate of around 2%, or at least in the United States they are. And here we might go for 2.5, but that would still be cutting it. What they want to do is get down to about a 2% growth rate, and so that they can truly have a handle on the inflation. Because once inflation happens, it's hard to shake off, and we haven't been able to rein in inflation very well. That's because the bankers and everybody were loath to do anything about it, knowing that raising the interest rates would be extremely unpopular, and then they had to raise them a very high amount. So anybody that was trying to get their mortgage renegotiated at that time, or buy a house, really got stung.
Yeah.
We know that this is the same story we've been hearing for a lot of times. The only exception here is the average person isn't expecting a rate drop. For the last 2 or 3 announcements, the average consumers, finally we're going to get a rate drop. Well, that doesn't happen until that inflation rate falls to a certain point. I think that's the only difference between this announcement and one's previous to this, is the fact that the average person does not expect a rate drop anytime soon.
Well, I don't know. That's an interesting subject in itself, because the BMO chief economist Douglas Porter is saying the door is now open for a Bank of Canada rate drop.
We heard that before too, almost nearly the same words. The last time they had one of these, and it was, yes, it's looking good. The potential is there, but we didn't see it, did we?
Yeah, but what happens is, there's and I don't quite know how this actually works in relation to bank cuts. Trading on overnight interest swaps market, the interest swaps market, priced a roughly 40% chance of a bank cutting its overnight interest rate by 0.25%. And within an hour, that rate, once these statistics were out, the chances of the cut moved up to 0.56%.
I believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to get a cut until the fall.
Well, I was speaking with somebody the other day who in the banks, and they were basically saying they were expecting one for June.
But we've heard it before. That's what I said. We heard it last year, almost at the same time. They expected a drop. As a matter of fact, I was talking to people who had expected and hoped for the drop, because that would make it clear whether or not they could afford the houses they had bought, not when the interest rates were quite a bit smaller. Now we'll see about that. We'll see about the interest rate drop. However, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, though. Because we've been hearing the same stuff said over and over. The Canadian productivity, and this is going to be a problem too, because the Canadian government has printed so much money. It's going to take a while for that to catch up to that. Also, the Canadian productivity is very low. We found this out from Freeland herself. The average Canadian worker and industry is has low productivity compared to the rest of the world, or at least the G7, G8 world. So why is that? And that will hold us back as well. And also the idea, I think it was Mark Carney who criticized the Liberal budget, mentioned that Canada must have not fertilizing the ground enough for foreign investment. We need a lot of foreign investment if we're going to keep our standard of living going, and
well,
that I don't think has been established very well. That will drain on the interest rates as well.
Yeah, this isn't the first time I've heard it. I've seen several reports dating back to about 2014 that were saying that Canada's industry wasn't reinvesting in the industry, and of course, since that we've had the collapse of. Since that time, or at around about that time, was when we had the collapse of Nortel. We've since had the collapse of BlackBerry and the like, and the question here is that isn't that clear that what we've got is a lack of investment? But that lack of investment is not going to be cleared anytime soon.
Well, these are factors that are hold back the Canadian government and may hold it back. Inflation drop, or interest drop. So these are other factors. I think the main thing will be the United States, and the United States came out with their figures a day or two ago, and they're saying exactly the same thing. The interest, they are happy that inflation is going lower, but they're not happy enough to make any recommendations for a lower interest rate. So we are pretty much in the same spot we were several months ago and several months before that. It's the same story, basically. We haven't got control of inflation enough. And part of that was the slowness by which they started to address inflation. They waited for the very last minute, and they gave out lots of warnings that that's what they were going to do. I think if they had just gone about and done their business, then we would have been able to control inflation a little bit better than we are right now, because they wait too long. They generally wait too long when that prosperous time that low interest rates caused starts to come to an end.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Mixed sentiment with the reestablishment of Niagara Falls Business Association leaves too much uncertainty downtown. So as the survey was done, Niagara Falls city officials will be meeting today with merchants at 5 p.m. at the University of Niagara Falls, Canada campus, which is next to City Hall, to go over the results of the survey conducted back in March and April. And Dean Spironelli, the acting city's economic development officer, has said they had 34 responses from individuals who are either business owners or managers of commercial property owners downtown. And from the responses they received, a majority indicate that they agree with the establishment of an organization such as a business improvement area or merchants association would benefit downtown, right? That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that an organization will materialize, because from the comments we received, there's still mixed sentiment about previous experiences with the BIA. I think to some extent, you need to basically, instead of the city controlling this development, I think the merchants need to control this development. It needs to be a wider area, not just 4 blocks downtown of Queen Street. It needs to take in some of the establishments that are at the lower end, at the same end of, where Queen meets Victoria, that kind of area, where Queen and Valleyway even meets Victoria. Some of those areas, like taking Morrison, for example, and Bridge Street, some of all of those traders there which are essentially not part of the original BIA. It needs to be expanded, in my view. Anyway.
Yeah, that BIA was troublesome, and it seemed like if I'm talking out of turn now, tell me I am, but I had a feeling that it was like one or two very uncooperative people on the previous BA, that the BA was split, and there was personalities that were really
there was.
It should have been a pretty ordinary business association.
Yeah, the biggest problem with it is, yes, there was fraction within the BIA, and part, I think, you see the St. Catherine's Downtown Association operates in a much bigger area, encompasses many more organizations of varying sizes, and is actually open a lot more to ideas and downtown, ideas to improve the downtown. I'm not holding out as a shining example of success. I'm just basically saying that they've got a wider scope for a wider range of businesses, which I think our downtown BIA needs to do as well, and not be so solely concentrated on Queen Street.
Yeah, maybe you're right about that, but first of all, you got to establish one that has the trust, and it really hasn't been happening there.
Yeah,
and as I said before, are the same personalities that seem to have made it impossible for the BIA to function. Are they still going to be part of the operation?
That's part of the challenge there, isn't it? And the worst fact about this, it seems to be once again driven by the city, rather than allowing the business people downtown to actually determine what they want to do.
Are you certain of that?
Well, I'm not certain of it, but we had about 2 to 3 years ago, we had discussion with somebody from the downtown BIA, if you recall, and we were talking about the problems that it had. And granted, that was only one voice by one of the sides. It's I think the question is that frustrations of the old BIA will always be in the backs of minds of certain people.
Yeah, well, how do you get around that? Like the article we're reading now is like it goes back quite a ways, I think. But in any case, how do you assure that? Like the whole idea of it was a failed BIA. They even had Councillor Wayne Campbell trying to mediate.
Oh, I know.
He came under attack.
And that
other
was
city
wrong.
officials have come under attack. Now, this is
It
supposed
was
to be a
wrong to
business
attack.
organization, which is a professional organization that, of course, you're not going to have everybody agree on everything, but not to the degree that it was happening there. Now, if those personalities still exist, and
absolutely,
if I get the right impression from what I read in the newspaper, then that same problem is going to start all over again.
And it was absolutely wrong to attack Councillor Campbell for the efforts that he did, because he was doing, his offer for mediation was founded with the premise that he could try and save the BIA. To attack that was wrong, in my view. He may have, what you should be doing is listening to somebody like that, and taking the mediation route and seeing what was possible. I'm not saying that it would have solved the problems, but talking often helps the situation.
Yeah. So anyway, that's still up in the air, and we don't know anything more about it other than looks like they're going to give it another try. You think doing the top-down thing from the city is not the way to go. However, them doing it organically doesn't seem to be thing that's going to happen.
I think give it another couple of years for them to grow something organically would be better.
I think that the whole idea they have to address the concerns they have now if they want to have some say into how the city's going to be developed, particularly downtown. I'm not so sure waiting 2 years is a good idea. I think they should actually just kind of figure out how to get their differences sorted out so that they can be a contributing factor to the city. Right now, they're not. They're kind of like a pariah BIA.
Well, my big thing about this is that they need to be a BIA, but a lot of the problem stems here from the fact that the city of Niagara Falls has the BIAs that are focused upon tourism areas, and I grant that tourism is a major contributing factor to this city. Always will be. Always has been, always will be. And it is important that the tourism industry is represented in the business improvement areas. However, one of the things is that to a large extent, tourism does take care of itself, has its own growth mechanisms. And we often focus too much upon tourism. And that actually is one of the reasons why I say open up the BIA to more than just a limited area in the 4 blocks of Queen Street and 2 streets, one street either side, to taking in the Queen and Valleyway and Victoria Avenue sections down there by near the library would be a very wise solution.
I think those things all said, they sound good, but you have to have a BA to start making those decisions to do that. You can't just impose it because Peter Giblett says so, or because the city says so, or whatever. That may be a good route to do it. But first you have to establish the BIA. You have to get it in there. You have to get it working and functioning before they can start making claims to these other areas. That may be all well and good. And I agree with you. It sounds good. However, you still have to get something started. And right now they have nothing.
Yeah. Well, Mike,
what else do we got up there anyway?
Mike says a couple of comments here. Mike says, how about abolishing all BIOs and have one city goal instead of allowing tourist part to handle the tax? I'm getting where you're coming from. We have the TIF destination fee, and etc. etc. Yeah, I get you. Okay, moving on, Dave. We've got Niagara students told. Niagara students were told impaired driving isn't limited to alcohol and cannabis, according by the what's his name? Niagara Regional Police Chief Bill Fordy, and he's talking about GPS and cell phones, especially capable of sending and receiving text messages while you're in the car, can potentially be a double-edged sword if they shift the driver's focus away from the road. And OSED, which is a students' association, Ontario Students Against Impaired Driving, this isn't a yesterday organization. This is established in 1987, so it's been going for quite some time. They had their province-wide OSED Day last Wednesday in Welland, and basically they invited Bill Fordy, Ontario Education Minister Steve Lecce, and Transport Minister Prabmeet Sakaria to that meeting.
When was that? That's another old article, isn't it?
It's an older article. It must be last Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, what I would like to sort of jump through, from there to here today, we find that the DUIs, drinking while driving under the influence, has been reduced. The charges have been reduced. And what's going on there? Now
Judges are allowed allow lowering of impaired driving charges. Yeah, I think that's actually that's actually that's an issue which I have a lot of issues with here. They're saying, okay, drivers accused of being drunk behind the wheel were suddenly presented with a deal which could see their changes downgraded to an offence under the Highway Traffic Act. Instead of it being a criminal code offence that they've got, they're offering, essentially, Ontario courts would have fewer cases, making them through an already backlogged system. And it's a limited time offer. What they're doing is a 12-month. They're prepared to offer pleas for dangerous driving, a dangerous operating a motor vehicle, $3,000 fine, 12-month prohibition, running concurrently with a 12-month loss of license under the Highway Traffic Act.
Well, they're not doing anything easy does it here. I could see, like, when I first read it, I was outraged. I read it and I didn't put a lid on my brain because I thought, this is stupid. You're letting drunk drivers get right back behind the wheel and all that until I read it. And it is an effort to sort of clear out the mountains of backlog cases. And the people who are getting who have been caught under the influence driving, they are now given a deal. And the deal is basically a $3,000 fine and 12-month probation running concurrent with the 12-month loss under the Highway Traffic Act. Now, this is probably what they were going to get anyway, maybe even a little worse. So this is not exactly, the plea is not exactly an easy does it plea to get to just remove cases from the backlog. It is actually
remove cases,
actually some bite to this. The deal has a bite to it, a deterrent. Go ahead.
What it does is it takes the criminal conviction away. That's what angers me, because in fact I've said this before, and I'm getting more and more convinced of this. I disagree that drunk driving is not a serious offence. Right? They're saying the policy
is a very serious offence.
It's a very serious offence. Policy introduced during the height of COVID was meant to ensure that justice system was prioritized with the prosecution of serious offences, while others, such as impaired driving and with non-aggravating factors, could be diverted away from criminal courtrooms. Right? Well, drunk driving, I'm sorry, is a serious offence and should be treated as such, and our penalties are not high enough. I've said that before, and I will say it again.
Well, if you compare it to other ones like gun possession and drug,
that's another serious
possession, it doesn't compare. We find it a lot of first time drug or arms young people who have arms particularly are sort of that part of it. The fact that they have had a gun in the pursuit of a crime, that's usually the thing that gets dropped, so they wouldn't have as much of a criminal record. Are they doing anything different here? I think, but I see the fact that you're saying it's not a criminal record now, but don't you think that particularly young people who are going to be the stupid ones here, for the most part, if they have a plea, a dangerous operation of a motor vehicle, and a $3,000 fine, plus a 12-month probationary period and a 12-month loss of their license, that's a pretty darn good.
It's pretty serious, I grant.
It's a pretty good down deterrent, particularly if the person knows if they reoffend, they're really, really, really in big trouble, and there's nothing going to save them, particularly when the judge looks over the fact that they got a break from being noticed as a criminal.
Well, I get that we've got a backlog, a serious backlog in all of our courts and tribunals in not just Ontario, but across, across other provinces as well.
Yeah, and that somehow had to do something with COVID, but it's also the pondering Byzantine pace by which Canadian law goes. If you've been in the court a lot, and I've gone there from time to time for other people, and I can't believe how slow it is, and how they can keep deferring cases here, there, and the other thing. And how long is court open? What, the judges work 5 hours a day and that's going to be it for them, or what? Can't they get more judges? Can't they use those courtrooms at night?
Actually, there's an interesting question there about how long the courtrooms being open. One of the problems is before COVID, you used to go to the desks in the courtrooms, just to go out to the desk, go hand in paperwork, or collect paperwork, or whatever you might do at the court offices. The court offices used to be open like 9 till 5, as was any other office. COVID basically restricted the hours from 9 till 11 and 1 till 4, and they've been restricted even though COVID is gone, right? So there's no need for restricted hours in courtrooms, for one. I know that I'm only talking there about admin offices, but how frustrating that is. And yes, we've got a lot more services online. Thank you very much, the courts. But there are times when you actually need a person.
Yes, and I'm afraid that the law was never set up to be a quick and time relevant thing. Whatever amount of time it takes, I'm afraid that it is just a very, very slow process. And I don't know how you might be able to speed it up in just procedural ways. But in any case, what we do have is this huge backlog. And you have, you personally do not like the fact that these people who are getting this deal are not being registered, not getting a criminal record out of it.
Well, I accept that actually there's a point whereby they are losing a lot of that. They're losing a year's worth of driving rights. That's for sure.
Yeah, and wait till the insurance gets a hold of their this. The insurance doesn't care at all. Like you're drinking and driving or impaired in any way. And remember what the cops had just said in the earlier article before that. Impaired now it includes using a phone. Believe me, if I've come into trouble or near trouble because of impaired drivers, it's one that's impaired on their phone.
Yeah. A
couple of them pulled out in front of me and I nearly hit them.
Oh yeah.
And that's because they were down looking at their phone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know. And that actually is the current. That's the current push by many police, is actually looking out for people who are impaired because of their phone activity. Although I have to say that, hey, we're talking about driving yesterday. I have to wonder about a stupid bloody truck that pulls over. I'm going down. I'm heading down the 405. I have priority, and the truck basically barges his way in. I don't care that you are not in the right lane soon enough. Get lost. You're not coming in when I'm coming down the lane. I'm already on that lane. He's causing me to brake. That's him. That's something that is a charge as well. Yeah. That drive.
Did you get their license and report them?
Oh, I should have done. I really should have done. Because I'm coming down at a rate.
I'm not talking just to the police. I'm talking about to the owners of that trucking firm.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They would like to know how they're driving.
Him pulling out when I've got yards, when I'm on a single lane, him pulling out into my lane when I'm less than 50 foot from him, all right, and I'm smacking my brakes on. I'm taking 50 kilometers an hour out of my speed in order not to hit that truck. Yeah, I should have taken his number. I really should have done.
But in any case, he wasn't impaired. Or at least we don't think he was.
I don't know whether he was impaired, but he wasn't thinking.
There's a lot of bad driving out there. That's for sure. There's a lot of bad driving out there for sure. And maybe he was on his phone too. Who knows? Maybe that's why he waited so long to make that transition from one lane to the other. Basically, it was either him or you, and you're the one that had to put your brakes on, and he knew it. He knew that that's what you were going to do, and you're going to let him in. Otherwise, you were the one that's going to be told.
He should not have been pulling in. I don't care that he's going the wrong way. If he wasn't in the lane already, he shouldn't have been pulling in at that stage.
Yeah, you're quite right, but he did.
Right?
He did.
Yeah.
And that's just that just happens. I'm afraid whoever must be green or something like that. Maybe he was distracted by his phone. Who knows? But I think probably the next time get the truck driver's number or whatever it is, the license plate, and report them back to the company because if you look at a lot of transport trucks that says, tell us how we're doing, and they give you a phone number. And,
I know.
And that kind of.
But you see, I don't have an ability to take that on my phone because my phone goes into driver mode and doesn't let me access things, right?
Well, you could do that later. You don't have to do it right away.
And I have no pen and piece of paper in my car.
Well, then you have no option then to allow that guy to do that every time then.
Yeah. Well, because I'm being a good driver. I don't write things down while I'm driving.
Anyway, so these guys, now it says the pandemic caused unprecedented challenges, but also I would like to put it out there that court is always slow and ponderous. And I don't know if it can be sped up. I mean, there has been attempts by various governments to try to light a fire under the legal system, but that has been established since the 18th or even 17th centuries from Britain onward. And that idea of that what did Dickens call it? The circumlocution office or something like, which meant it would just go round and round and round. Let's see if I can find that term.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I remember the term. I don't know what you're trying to refer to. Karen says, hey, are they doing this because our judicial system is short by 73 judges? Karen, yes, precisely. Thank you very much for pointing that out. That is precisely the reason they're doing it, because they need to appoint more judges.
Yes, it's called the circumlocution office. And this was what Dickens talked about when he talked about the endless forever bureaucracy of the legal system. And of course, it was much worse then, but still has elements of that now, where it just takes forever really to get the smallest things done, or at least that is our impression. So he called it the circumlocution office. And if you look up that term, it just means it goes round and round and round and never kind of resolves itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is actually a problem that we've got. A number of we talked about nurses retiring. I'm conscious that we've had at least half a dozen judges in our local area retiring, and I'm not sure they've been replaced.
No, I think the whole legal system has never seemed to have been modernized. It never has been prepared for like you would think, well, okay, we're going to have X amount of judges retiring pretty soon. Don't you think we should find judges to fill that up? But we don't.
You think so? Would go? Yeah, exactly. You'd know that, especially since we know that 75 is a mandatory retirement age for judges. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I understand where it comes from.
Well, you could probably move that up to 80 nowadays because when they put the 75 thing in there, but that that particular time they're trying to protect Canadians from older judges that really didn't know what they're doing anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the senators we used to have. We used to have.
Well, there used to be judges
with no time limit on them, and they would be rolled in on a wheelchair in any mandatory day they had, and they wouldn't know who was talking or who was saying anything. They're getting large paychecks.
And there was always accusations of judges being fast asleep in the chair. But I do remember actually sitting in a courtroom where the judge had his eyes completely closed. He was sitting there like this with his eyes closed, and I'm thinking, is this judge asleep? And as the proceeding went on, he said, "Miss Jones, I have a question. Do you really need to put that question that way?" You know.
Okay, whatever. He may have been just resting his eyes. You never know.
He wasn't. He was apparently. I spoke to somebody who knew that judge, and he has his way was to keep his eyes closed, but he's auditory in nature.
Whatever, he did his job, and I don't know what we do now is I don't know. We can just go right back to the beginning. Karen Fraser says here, our listener Karen Fraser says, we have not had any new judges in 5 years. Well, that obviously is a big problem, isn't it?
We have actually, but just not enough.
It's not enough. So we have a system that tends to be ponderously slow at the best of times, and you have a backlog left from pandemic times, and we have, of course, not as many judges or legals that we need. Of course, that's all contributing to the slowdown. So when the government comes up with a deal for the number of people who have been impaired driving and says, look, this is a limited time offer only, and I imagine they're zooming in on the young because they don't really want them to have a criminal record early in their life. So they're zooming in on the young and say, you're not going to get a criminal record, but what you're going to do is you're going to pay a $3,000 fine. You're not going to be able to drive for a year, and you're going to be on probation for a year. And you can do that real quick, and we'll get this fixed and get you off the list. That may be fairly appealing. When I was in St. Catharines, I was waiting for my son to get his driver's license or driver's test to do. There were young men in line there trying to get their license back after having it suspended a year, and their insurance rates were astonishing. Yeah. That's another thing that will sort of a deterrent, if you will, to be impaired the next time around. I'm not so sure. You don't like the fact that you don't have a criminal record after this, but I think it's a good way of clearing out a lot of backlog. It's also and they don't get off scot-free. And I imagine most of these guys are young because they just are normally. And I don't really want them to have a criminal record if I can help it here. If they're young people and they've done drinking and driving or something, and sometimes it might not be that much too. It might be a 0.9. They might blow 0.9. They may have had a reefer that day sometimes. So sometimes like I know a guy lost his license for blowing 0.9 when the rate was 0.8 at the time. And they lose the license the same way as a guy I know that was about 4 times that much, you know. Yeah. And they both lost license the same. One was in control of the car enough. Another one obviously was not, being that drunk. So I don't know. They don't have degrees of impaired. So I don't know. I really don't. I really don't want a young person to get a criminal record because they were stupid. This gives them another chance, basically, but they don't get a free buy. They get $3,000 fine, 1 year without driving, plus 12 years or 12 months probation.
But this is
plus
not
they're going to get a hell of a big insurance cost.
This is not just young people. There are plenty of people in their 40s and 50s that also are quite happy to go drunk driving.
Well, yeah, but I don't think this will be offered to them. This is a limited time only, and they're not offering it to everyone. I suspect they're going to be, I don't know for sure, but I suspect they're going to be targeting the younger ones.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on anyway. There's new rules for guide dogs owners are wary that there's new rules for entering to the US border crossings, and basically new entry requirements for dogs traveling from Canada to the US could make it more difficult for those with guide dogs to get there. And basically it's all about rabies jabs and things like that.
Where was this article? Is it another real old one?
It wasn't real old one. It was one we had for yesterday.
For yesterday? I don't see it.
Guide owners say US rules will complicate border crossings.
No, right. I didn't get it.
Okay. Well, basically, the rules will come into effect on August 1st, and dogs owners or guardians must also fill out an entry application form that includes 2 photos of the dog, and the dog must appear healthy upon arrival at the border post. So Daryl Strickle, who's a consultant and who is legally blind, who says traveling internationally is something that is in a crucial part of his work, is changing. So he's going to it's going to slow down his crossing the borders.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I haven't got the article here. I can't read it, but guide dogs are essential to the blind. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, one of the Toastmaster that came in second place at District 86 and the speaking contest was a blind guy, Wayne Tuttle. He won second place, and he's been part of Toastmaster for a long time. Dogs are really important to him.
Yeah, I've seen him. I've seen that particular individual. I remember him. Yes, absolutely. And guide dogs are an important part. In fact, actually, when you look at guide dogs now, guide dogs are not just for the blind, but you have like there's a dog that you can actually get dogs for people who've got severe diabetes, who the dog will nudge them or do something if they, service support animals, if they are about to actually go into diabetic shock.
Dogs now are like, as a club, we've sponsored dogs for autistic children. Like children who are autistic, a dog can help them calm down and be part of reality. So they have dogs that they develop for autistic children. They have dogs they develop for people who are just stressed out, and some just for older people, particularly with dementia and stuff like that. So dogs are filling in a lot of places, and they need a lot of training, and that costs money. And when you get a dog and it's trained the way you want it, and you're going to go through some sort of hiccup at the border, what was the reasons they gave for the new rules?
Well, basically, I think they're under new updated guidelines. They're trying to reduce the spread of rabies. So this is what the U.S. Centers for CDC is basically saying. There's a slew of new requirements for dogs crossing the border, and they're they vary based upon the age and country of origin and travel history of the dog.
Well, I think that the law was made more for dogs coming from a different country other than Canada. Obviously, a guide dog in Canada would have had all its shots. It has to have had. It would have had extensive training. It would have had all its shots. So the whole idea of a guide dog having to have all those things, and for the border police to have to go through that is, is just redundant.
Well,
Talk about a redundancy. And then all it does
I'm
is
wondering about
the life of the blind person who needs the dog.
I'm wondering about the training for the additional training required for the border control officers. How would a border control officer recognize a healthy dog or not?
Well, obviously, too, and it's very unlikely. Like the whole idea, I think the whole law was started to reduce reduce rabies coming into the country. Well, yeah, along the Mexican border, yeah, there'd be all kinds of, like, if you're bringing your pet across the Mexican border where there's less, less eyeballs on shots, the dog's getting shots. Yeah, or if you're if you're just bringing a stray into the country, if you do the reversal that in Canada we get a lot of dogs from the U.S. Rescue dogs, even though we have plenty of our own, but we get these rescue dogs that were going to be euthanized, so we bring them up here. Yeah, they all have their shots and everything else. So why wouldn't you think it's the same way going the other way around? I think basically the bureaucracy that's set up here to check, guide dogs is actually, it just happens that guide dogs fall into this, but they're really after is other pets that may not have had shots enough. If you could produce the certificates that it has shots or whatever, that would, that would probably.
I would think that consultant that was complaining about this, legally blind consultant, says he travels internationally for his work, right? And essentially what would happen for him is he would have to basically make time in his schedule to ensure he's got the right paperwork for his dog, and that paperwork therefore is always with him. And I'm sure he will. I'm sure that's just enough time, just take an extra half day to actually make sure that paperwork's all done, or a day, or whatever it is, depends upon how many hoops you have to jump through. But jump through the hoops and you'll be fine.
Yeah, but they already have all of that anyway, and so
most likely,
I don't think they're going to jump through any hoops they haven't already. Like, I mean, when they take a guard or a guide dog across, they're going to have all this paperwork. I mean, obviously that's already been part of it. These extra rules are just impositions, and I think probably what they'll do is eventually they'll take guide dogs off of their list of dogs they have to check for rabies or something. That as long as the owner produces some certification as to what the dog, if the dog's had a shots or whatever else. Now these, like I said before, these I think these are more designed for people with pets, and anyone can say that they have a guide dog. You could say you trained it yourself, whatever. Those are the things they're probably looking for. They're trying to reduce the amount of rabies, and definitely the rabies are not going to come in with guide dogs, are they?
Yeah, that's a good thing that the US is trying to reduce the rate of rabies, and rabies has been a problem in the US for quite some time.
It's always a reoccurring problem, and it comes up here as well too. But the problem is here is the umbrella by which they hope to filter out dogs coming into the United States that have rabies is, unfortunately, that umbrella is covering ordinary guide dogs, which is almost preposterous when you think of it. They're the least likely dog that's going to have rabies. They're going to be the least likely dog that has any of that. And Karen Fraser points out all dogs have needed proof of vet reports at the border for decades. So what is the problem? There you have it. Where she's made it very clear there, and that's what I thought too. So I really don't understand the urgency of this, and really, cannot you make an exception for guide dogs, particularly when they've had to be trained, and if you have to bring your papers, like Karen says anyway, what is the why do they need to do this?
Couldn't they be put on couldn't you carry a QR code on your phone that would enable the customs officer to just basically go beep, yes, and read that record of, the record of in vaccinations, etc.?
I don't know. I think it's just a mistake, and that they're probably going to sort it out sooner or later.
Well, I wonder if it's for all they're doing is, yes, you're right that probably we've needed proof of vaccination for dogs for years, but somehow there's been some gaps in the system that they're now tightening up.
Maybe, but really, it is preposterous to have guide dogs grouped in among them, because if you have to go to the border with all your paperwork anyway, and on top of that, you're a guide dog, which makes it even more important to have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted, to be able to hold a person up because for another bureaucratic, senseless entanglement. I think it'll just have to be fixed. I think sooner or later somebody's going to say, hey, wait a minute, this shouldn't apply to guide dogs.
Yeah, agreed. All right, I think we can leave it there.
Yeah, for today. We've still got lots of stuff to do. I'm particularly annoyed at Trudeau's reaction to the ICC. He's saying there is no fluency. Yeah, okay, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
We'll talk about that one, I think, tomorrow, because that is on that list. The ones outstanding.
Yes, some of those articles went back a ways and I couldn't find them. Anyway, so that we talked about today, yeah. In any case, without further ado, I bid you to do, everyone, and pray for peace.